Hey everybody, welcome back to the 18th episode of Taps and Patience. I am AJ with Design the Everything here with Harrison of Precision Ingenuity. Hey Harrison, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How you doing this evening?
I am feeling so much better than I was a week or two ago.
Oh, what happened?
Yep. Antibiotics.
Starting.
So
Go ahead.
yeah, sometime I've been so out of it that I've lost all track of time. But I've been sick for like a month, or I had been sick for like a month, maybe 5 weeks. It started right after Thanksgiving, actually, because it started with me being allergic to my in-laws' dogs, and then like that turned into a cold, and then that turned into bronchitis or something, and then that turned into a pneumonia. Um, and of course, this was all while I was trying to fulfill the Kickstarter for the carabiners, and I was just always tired and always sick and always coughing. And then finally, it got so bad the other day that we were talking to a doctor that's in our family, and she was like, "You might have pneumonia. Let me give you some antibiotics and some steroids, and that'll
Oh,
take care of that." And that took care of that. She wrote me a prescription, and my wife went and picked it up for me, and um, I mean, before that, I was miserable. I was stuck in bed. I was throwing up. I was by the toilet for other reasons, um, and like I just felt awful. But antibiotics. The next day, I was like pretty good. The day after that, I was back in the shop for a couple hours. I like worked a couple hours, went took a nap, then went back for another couple hours, and now I'm more awake and alert and able to think than I've been in literally a month or a month and a half.
that is
So
awesome. I haven't.
thank you
I didn't
for
go. I was gonna
yeah.
say I
I was
didn't
gonna
go down
say
as hard as you did, but I feel I went through something similar. And when you get a good night's sleep and wake up and feel so much better, it just everything runs smoother. So,
so. I got some really cool parts in the mail today.
oh, do tell.
They're from this little, not I was gonna say niche manufacturing company, but that's not really true. Um, this little manufacturing company in Arkansas. Um, wait, no, Arkansas, is that right?
Yeah, it's Arkansas.
Okay, sorry, I just had a first. Okay, anyway, yeah. So Harrison made me a bunch of my orange slices and more tape measure shells. I am almost completely out of orange slices after the holiday season. Sales have slowed down after the holidays for sure. I think I've only
Yeah.
sold two or three in the last couple weeks. Or they've just been eclipsed by carabiners. Maybe people are buying carabiners instead of the orange slices. But now, with a little bit of tumbling, at least I will be fully restocked on those, which will be great. Because those have been just like a constant rock steady, like never a huge seller, but like I'm always selling, $250, $300 of them a month. And it was just a nice, really stable income. So
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not running out of those.
That's like the perfect type of product. It's like not one that like has highs and lows, but one that's consistent.
Yep.
So, well, that's good. So, yeah, they were a fun little project to do, and we had a lot of fun doing them. I felt a little bit bad with how long it took us to get them done because of my mishaps on the ordering side, but I felt pretty good about the final result when we got them all done. And your
And that's
tape
why I ended up
measures.
with the. Oh, sorry.
Uh, no, go ahead.
Um, and that's why I ended up with extra copper ones, right? It's just because you ordered extra.
No, that was straight from Send Cut Send. They sent us that many extra
Okay,
from what we ordered.
I'll take them. It is what it is.
That's what we said. We're like, well, here's the deal. We ordered like two extra of every single type just to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that if something went wrong, we had
Yeah, set
extra.
of pieces.
Yeah. And they sent us the correct amount of one sides. They didn't send us they sent us two less than what we ordered on another, so we had the exact amount we ordered. And then they sent us eight more than we had ordered on the other one. So their numbers were all over the place.
That
And
is
then
wild.
yeah, then we messaged them about it and they gave us a credit back, but we were placing an order and I was like, "Hey, can you just add those two onto the order that we just placed?" And they were like, "Oh, we can't, sorry, but we'll overnight you some. I was like, okay, that's fine. That's cool too. And then I never got those, but the order I did get came with extra again. So I'm just like, I don't know what's going on, but we don't get the amount that we've ordered on any of these orange slices. So I don't know what's
Huh.
going on. But
I know I've always gotten way extra from them before. Like on the key rings, they gave me like 45 extras, which granted, I
yeah,
ordered like 2,000 key rings, but hey,
yeah.
45 is 45.
When you're ordering like 20, it doesn't take that much to count. So, and you can
Yeah.
see it visually on the package when it's like these are
Yes.
all supposed to be the same amount, and there is way more of one than the others.
Yeah.
So,
Um, Actually, to be fair, with the key rings, I didn't count. I just like they had numbers written on the baggies they came in. Like there was one baggie that said like 700, and one baggie that said like 800, and one baggie that said I don't
mhm.
know whatever math is left. And I just kind of went off their numbers and added them up, and they gave me like 45 extra. But
Yeah, yeah.
anyway,
So, which I understand why you cut extra, but
yes,
I also don't understand why sometimes you have less than what is ordered. So, or why the extra you count isn't consistent. So
yes, yeah,
maybe they just fill up a sheet and just go with that. I guess I don't know,
it's
but
true. Dead space is dead space. Might as well, you know, not risk
yeah,
undercutting.
yep. But anyways, regardless, I'm glad we got them to you. And your tape measures ran really good the second time. I
Sweet.
was I didn't have to really do hardly any tweaking. At that point, we had got them dialed in, and they ran smooth.
That's
So
that's how you want it.
yeah, no, I was very impressed. I just got done cleaning out the machine today, and I had um, half of a 55-gallon drum of shavings, and most of that was from your tape measures. So
Yeah, I guess they're mostly. It's one of those parts that becomes mostly air.
yeah, hmm so it was pretty cool. Um, I do have some good news though.
What's that?
Uh, so a company that we've been doing some work with just sent us a massive PO.
Nice.
At least it's about 2 or 3 times the size of the first PO we got from them, which is a really good sign. And then I almost feel like I underbid everything because I sent them the quote and they're like, "Oh, numbers look good, go for it," and it was like too fast for them to actually like um I don't know if they sent it out to other people or what, but like they just came back. We're like, "Oh yeah, that's great," and I'm just like, "Did I way underbid this?
Yeah.
like, like what's going on now?" So
Is it millwork or lathe work?
99% mill with I think 3 lathe parts in there. Um, so the original PO or the original quote was for 107 parts, and about 20 different flavors of parts in that 107. Um, and a lot of them are on the edge of what I can fit on my machine. Um, so that's going to be fun. But we verified that we could run them all, and thankfully, a lot of them can be water jet cut on the external features, but they all have a lot of internal features that'll need machined. So my plan is to get almost all of them water jet cut. Maybe some of them water jet cut a little bit oversized, and then bring them into spec. That way, I'm not because my machine is really slow at removing bulk material. Excuse me. So if I can get them water jet cut and remove most of the material, and then just kind of touch them into spec, then I think that'll be golden. Plus, the way this company works, they want everything sandblasted anyway. So,
Oh,
um,
okay.
so I'm not too
The
worried
water jet
about.
basically does that already.
Yeah, so I'm not too worried about like surface finish quality too much, unless they have higher tolerances. And then those faces, I typically they like them if they're left not sandblasted. So
Makes sense.
mating surfaces. So, but anyways, excited to see that. Um, and I didn't really talk about this much last week because we had a guest. which I really enjoyed last week's podcast with James. So that was awesome. But I got a new software called Monday.com.
Ah,
So
yeah.
um, it's free for 2 users or less, which thankfully it's just me and my cousin right now, so we qualify. Um, and we've started using it to organize all of our thoughts and jobs that we currently have going through. And so it's been awesome. And I think it's reduced a lot of mental stress of just keeping up with everything. Um, and it makes me feel like I'm doing better than I thought I was on some level, because we didn't create jobs for necessarily all the gun stuff we were doing. So a lot of that stuff was just in our head. And so we would look at like stuff that we're working on and we had it on like a whiteboard and the list would be pretty small. But now we've started putting stuff like gun stuff on into our workflow. And so we know what's going on and what's coming up. And we feel a lot, I feel a lot busier, but I also feel a lot more productive, because we can organize stuff and be like, okay, on this day we want to get this done. On this day we want to get this done. On this day we want to get this done. Do we have work lined up for 3 days, 5 days, a week, 2 weeks? And we can start to kind of picture and graph some of that stuff out. And we can also make notes on things like, hey, make sure we have this stuff ordered by this date. Make sure, material should be coming in on this date. So if this date comes by and material's not in, then figure out what's going on. Like we can set reminders and things, and it's all live between the two of us. And we can leave notes for each other, but we don't have to tell them to each other. We can just leave a note, and then if you go to work on that job, I can go back and be like, okay, Weston, when he was working on this job, he did this last, and he left me a little note. That way, whenever I start working on it, I know what to do next. And so for that, I think it's just cleared up a lot of mental space, for both of us. So
I use Airtable pretty heavily. I used to use it more than I do now. But Airtable, I think, kind of lets you do a lot of the same things, but it's less like productivity focused. It's more just like store anything. Whereas
mhm.
Monday.com sounds a little bit more like this is for organizing your work.
It is, and the nice thing about it is you can set up automations, so you can have it automatically advance stuff. Like you can set it up however you want. But the way I have it set up right now is I have different categories. I have categories for jobs that we have had requests for bid, but we haven't actually bid it yet. I have jobs that we have bid but have not been either awarded or denied. I have jobs that are active. I have jobs that we have finished but haven't got paid for. And then I have jobs that are 100% closed out. And so we can see them as they go through all the different stages. And then we can track how long they're in each stage. And then I can have automations where I can have priorities like, okay, we want to have it done by this day. So I'll have a flag that'll be like 5 days out. And then when it gets to the day before, it'll turn to tomorrow. And then when it turns to the day of, it'll turn bright red and say, this needs to get done today. And then if I miss it, it'll turn black and go, hey, you're late. Get this done today. So stuff like that it, I mean, we're setting our own due dates. It's not like I have a boss that's over my shoulder, which is the one thing I always hated about stuff like that. I always hated that pressure. But now being my own boss, it kind of gives me reassurance to know, okay, what did I think I could get done myself? And am I setting realistic or unrealistic expectations for myself and what we can actually accomplish in a workday? So I don't overload ourselves, and so I can give people realistic timelines. So
Yeah, makes sense. I really need to get well. Let me take a step back. Have you ever played with Google App Sheets, or formerly just known as App Sheets before Google bought them?
very, very, very little. I played with them briefly, but I didn't have a whole lot of time to dedicate to like writing everything that I had in my everything I wanted to get out of them.
I I've played with Google App Sheets some. I set up a like a work order system for the engineering department, meaning me basically at my last job because it was a one man show, and I had a way so that the either the shop or my boss could assign me work orders, and
Mm-hmm.
um, it never ended up getting used because they didn't really do computer. Like I couldn't convince them to like actually use a digital organized system.
Mm-hmm.
But it was something that I was trying to set up to make it easier for the next engineer, and like I was on my way out, and if they didn't want to use it, whatever, I wasn't going to make them. But anyway, I really like Google App Sheets, and I want to move a lot of the stuff that I do now from Airtable to App Sheets, and particularly for things like tracking mileage, because technically that truck I have is a Design the Everything truck, um, and whenever I drive it, I need to track the mileage, so I get my 56 cents or whatever it is a mile.
Yeah.
But do you know how many times I've done that this year without having any sort of system in place?
Probably too much.
No, I've done it exactly 0 times. I've done
Oh,
it none.
really?
Yeah. Basically, my plan is to go through and count up the number of receipts I have at our hardware store, which is where I drive the truck 90% of the time, and I'm just going to take that distance and multiply it. Um, but I have
Ah,
forgotten to write down the actual mileage every single
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So obviously, I need some sort of better system in place because I don't know. That's like hundreds of dollars of tax deductions that I could have.
Yeah. I know. I think it was. I don't know if it's QuickBooks or something else. That there is apps where you
QuickBooks
can
does it.
track.
Yes, there's lots
Um.
of ways you can do it.
Yeah. I even thought about at one point doing like an Uber deal where I'm not actually using Uber to drive, but just using it to track getting from location to location.
Yeah,
Kind of.
I yeah. It also does not help that in that truck the screen that has the display of your mileage and if you're like what gear you're in doesn't work.
Hmm.
So like I still don't know how many miles are on that truck. They had a guess. It was.
Oh,
Did I mention this was an under $3,000 truck?
yeah.
So
No, you
I
hadn't,
would have
but
to do it via Google Maps anyway.
yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah. Hmm. So what else you got going on?
Um, well, today was really my first full day of work since being sick, and so that's probably like a week or so that I've been,
Hmm.
a full day. Um, I did a couple things. I got caught up on some carabiner Kickstarter orders that have been trickling in, um, just for
Carib.
people who didn't fill out their backer survey on time.
Oh, okay. I was confused. I was like, I thought you got all those shipped out.
I shipped out the main batch of everybody who filled out their backer survey on time, which was about 350 orders. I just shipped out about 10 more today, and now I have 40 people left who have not filled out their backer survey yet. And they will get an
Gotcha.
email every Tuesday until they do so. But otherwise, it's
Paid, but haven't sent in their.
yeah, they've paid. I have their money. I just can't send them the carabiners because I don't have their address.
Oh man,
So
that's annoying.
carabiners have been trickling out. I've sold a not a torrent of them, but a steady flow.
That's good.
Um, so, like in fact, the this month has been probably my best month on Etsy in a couple months. So, and we're only
That's
9 days
awesome.
into the month.
That's awesome.
So that's been pleasant. I even ordered more carabiner blanks today, which I did not expect to have to do for
Really,
months. Yeah,
that is
part of that
awesome.
part of that is because I have so many colors that like I have a lot of carabiners tied up in various colors.
Oh, okay.
Um,
That's fair.
so like if I have 10 of each color, I have 120 carabiners sitting in inventory.
Yeah.
Um,
Are you trying to keep X amount in each color, or are you going to get to the point where you only have stonewash and you paint them per order?
I am going to slowly dwindle down my numbers, and I will keep the bulk of them in stonewashed. And then if I run out of a certain color, I'm just going to powder coat 6, which is just one side of my powder coating fixture,
Hmm.
and I'll keep those in inventory again until I run out of them, and then I'll do 6 more.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It's a good strat. So
So let's see. Been tricking like carabiners. I just ordered some more. I have some changes I want to make to my machining process on those, but nothing major. I'm going to go to a slightly smaller slot on the inside so they're just a little bit stiffer. And I'll probably do a roughing and a finishing tool.
getting ready for your next Kickstarter?
I am. So that's the other big news. I am aiming to launch my next Kickstarter on the 15th, which is in 6 days.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it probably won't happen quite on the 15th because I still have to get approved by Kickstarter and the campaign isn't done yet.
Okay.
So I think in order to get approved, I would have to launch by, or I'd have to submit for approval probably by Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That might be possible at this point, actually. But I'm I kind of did an oopsie because I told people that I was going to do the tape measures of the next Kickstarter. I even
Mm-hmm.
put that in the sticker of the month club letter,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm changing my mind.
Okay.
Um, so now I'm going to remove the generative element from the tape measure Kickstarter, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to stick it onto a coin, just like some of those coins that I made for the prototype of the month members,
Mm-hmm.
and that'll be my make 100 entry. So I'm only going to make 100 of them, even if the Kickstarter does like completely sells out all 100. It's only going to be like a $3,000 Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So just
Now,
a quick little one.
did you get any feedback from those guys that you sent them to for your from your Patreon on the coins?
The big things was they need to be tumbled a little bit longer, which makes sense. I only gave them a couple hours because I was in a hurry. And then there was some, the way that I was generating toolpaths could result in some little gouges.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have that worked out mostly by changing the tool I'm using. And then also more contrast between the inside and the outside, between the engraving and the surface.
Now, were they happy with the coins as like a concept or as like a an item?
Yes, they were.
Good.
And I mean, it's always just going to be a coin. Like it's never
Yeah.
going to be a mind blowing product. But I mean, it's a
Well,
very satisfying little coin.
it is, and that's the thing. Like, that's our number one seller on Etsy is those coins as custom laser engravings. Um, People love them, and
Speaking of which, I need to buy like 10 or 20 of those from you for practicing purposes.
yeah, we can do that. Actually, if you'd said something sooner, we could have sent them with your
I
your other
know.
order.
I didn't think about it. Um, I had pneumonia. I have an excuse.
Yeah, that's fair.
But today I started experimenting with some of that finishing technique on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I found something that'll work. I need to see if it'll hold up over time. But basically, like I was having a hard time getting the engraving to be dark. I didn't want to use Cerakote. I didn't want to use powder coat. I didn't want to do an enamel fill. And so what I, after a couple of experiments, what I settled on was doing, I think this qualifies as a cold blue or a hot blue. I think it qualifies as bluing. It's not a cold blue. It's a hot blue where I heat it up with a propane torch. I sandblast it first. Then I heat it up with a propane torch. And then I quench it in some tapping oil. And that gives a really nice matte gray finish to it. And I'm hoping that when they come out of the tumbler tomorrow, the outside of it will be smooth and shiny. And then the inside of the engraving will still be sandblasted in black. That's what I'm going for.
That's really cool. It's a good idea. The other idea I was going to suggest was, and well, I don't know. Can have you tried tumbling something after you've powder coated it? Does that flake off after you?
I've never done it with powder coat. I've done it with Cerakote. I think the powder coat would probably stay intact mostly, whereas the Cerakote does kind of get beaten off.
Yeah, that's why I didn't know the difference between powder coat and Cerakote. If powder coat, if you tumbled it, if the powder coat would come off. Or the other thing I was going to say is, can you powder coat it, flash cure it, but not cure it all the way, and tumble the excess off, and then cure the rest of it somehow?
I don't know. I've definitely never tried that. Um, but there's no way really to hold these things.
Mm-hmm.
There's no holes or anything. Actually, I guess you could just clamp them because you were gonna if you clean out the outside.
Exactly.
Um, okay, so you could hold them. I don't know.
I mean, you could almost hold them, and you could almost powder coat them, and then while the powder's still on there, because it's all going to be in the cracks and crevices, you could like lightly sand them to remove all the powder off the outside,
Hmm.
and then cure them. And then when you tumbled them, any small specks that you might have left on the outside would go away, and it'd be mostly in the cracks at that point. And then you could do different colors. Not saying that what you're doing now isn't a cool, great idea, but if you ever wanted to add color, that's another thought.
Yeah, I know. I know with powder coat you can heat up the thing that you are coating, and then like heat it up to the point where it's hotter than the melting point of the plastic, and then you spray it with the plastic, and um, it sticks
Flash
to it. I
cures.
guess is the answer. It'll stick to it, but not really cure into a full shell. And I bet at that point you could like wipe it off. That's called hot flocking. Like you would
Mm-hmm.
flock the inside of a jewelry box or whatever. Um, and that's how you would powder coat something that's like plastic or glass. Is you
Gotcha.
hot flock it, something that's non-conductive. Um, I don't know. That I've never played with that stuff. It's an option for sure, but I'll have to
I
try it at some
find that
point.
when you try things that are unique like that, even if you don't use it for that project, you usually find a use case for it later on.
Yes, that's very true.
Like anytime I've tried to experiment with different surface finishes and stuff, like 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work for what I'm intending it to. But then there's that. But most of the time, I usually can come back to it later and be like, I tried it on this and it didn't work, but for this, it would be great. So
I I love different metal surface finishes. That's one of, like finding different metal surface finishes is one of my favorite things.
yeah,
Um, like if you look back at the arch top I did, which sorry I'm not in the mode where I can screen share right now. We had like 5 different or 6 different finishes for it that I thought were all pretty good, and like I still use those for various projects I have in various products, and it was all just from playing around with different finishes.
yeah. Finishes are what really set you apart. Like anyone can machine something, but like I went to look at a guy who makes knives locally. He's got these knives that it's a solid piece of metal and it's an integrated metal handle into the knife blade. Like it's all one piece. But the surface finish that he has on it compared to the contrast to the blade, and then the handle's all pocketed out. Like I was staring at it for like 10 minutes trying to figure out how he did it and how he got it to kind of wrap around the chamfers and through the holes. Like I mean, it wasn't perfect, but it looked so good. And it looked like a brushed metal, but it looked like it was like a painted on brushed metal look, but it was actually in the metal. Um,
And was
so
the answer to how he did it just hours of hand sanding?
no, I didn't end up asking him how he did it. I want to later, but I was just admiring it. And I know the answer is probably going to be a lot of hand finishing because he's been doing custom knives for over 20 years, and he's got like 100 different sanders with different grits and different belts, and like he's only just now getting into CNC. So like he's someone who started off as a pure like water jet cut blank and then literally grind every piece of metal down to the right shape and size, and then that's his knife. He's now getting into more mass production where he went from producing, a handful of knives to a week to like a couple hundred a week because he's machining the blanks down to the point where it only takes like a small fraction of the time to hand finish it compared to what he was doing before. So,
Because he started his knife business in the PG era, the pre Grimsmo era,
oh
where
yeah.
everyone started doing them CNC.
Actually, I think I was the first person that, or one of the first people that talked to him about Grimsmo knives. It actually, okay, here's a funny story. Grimsmo Knives actually mentions him on mentions this guy specifically. His name's Crine, Tom Crine, Crine Knives. He mentions him specifically on one of their really old YouTube videos because Tom Crine, he had brass, this hammered brass knife scales, and someone talked to Grimsmo and was like, "I want you to make scales that replicate Tom's design." And so there's a whole
Interesting.
YouTube video that I found of Grimsmo when he's at home in his garage trying to replicate a Crine
Yeah.
knife.
Was
Uh,
that like pre Norseman when he was just doing like the Spyderco stuff?
I think he was just starting on his on. I think it was actually a Grimsmo knife that he put a hammered finish on. So it was on his knife, and the customer wanted a custom scales that looked like Crine knives.
Interesting.
So I found that video and I went ballistic, like because I was just one day going through old Grimsmo videos, and I think I saw like Crine knives in the description or in the title, and I was like, "What?" And I started going crazy because I've known the guy for years, so um, because he's lived around here. And when I was in high school, I used to go to his shop all the time and be like, "Hey, can you sharpen my knife?" And I'd have like this like $5 Walmart knife, and he's been making these $1,000 knives. And like me as a kid, I didn't know. I just knew that he worked with knives, and I was like, "Can you sharpen this thing?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." So I now I realize that I could probably go back and be like, "This was a knife that was hand sharpened by Tom Crine." So, but
Anyway, taking a step back. So coins. So I have 3 coins in my tumbler right now. If all goes well, those should be my final prototypes and ready for product photography.
nice.
And which, because I'm on such a tight deadline, I guess I'm just doing myself. But it's fine because I don't want to eat my margins on such a small campaign with somebody else anyway. Um, and all of the Kickstarter stuff that is not actually writing the campaign is done. So like I set up the new project on Kickstarter. I've done all the identity verification. I've created all of the items and the rewards and all of that stuff, but I haven't actually written the campaign itself yet.
Do
And
you
I should be able to get that stuff done in 2 days because I have a good template at this point.
Awesome. I got a question for you real quick about Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the more you do Kickstarter, the faster it is to get verified? Or is it the same
Uh,
amount no matter how many you've done?
I don't remember. It was definitely the same day for me. Like I
Okay.
did it all in one work session. Like this was, an hour or two of work, and I hit, verify me, and then I checked back a couple minutes later, and it was like, you're not verified, and then a couple minutes after that, it was done. So
Okay. Fair enough. I was just
I mean, they're not
curious, like,
doing a background check. So
no, no, but I feel like if you've done so many successful campaigns, eventually, like, I feel like they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we know this guy. He's done successful campaigns in the past, so why do we have to keep verifying?"
yeah, I think it's actually you're not verifying with Kickstarter. You're verifying with Stripe, the payment processor, and I think they kind of set you up a temporary Stripe account, like a subsection of their account. You get your own little Stripe account.
Gotcha. That makes
Uh,
sense.
at least that I don't know. I could be completely wrong, but that's kind of how I've
So
thought it
that's why they have to
was
set it up every time for at each individual
each campaign.
project. That way you know exactly how much money went to that campaign because it's in a separate account. Makes complete and total sense now. So I bet yeah, that makes sense.
But I need
Um,
to.
Go ahead.
I'm reiterating. So yeah, I just need to take the product photos, write the campaign, and then submit it for approval. The only other thing that I need to do for that campaign, and maybe I just don't do this or change my scope of work here a little bit, is I was going to do a optional add-on stand for the coin.
Mm-hmm.
The original plan was to do it out of walnut and probably basically just make it a table saw project, like no CNC, just
Mm-hmm.
cut some profiles out, chop them up, put some finish on them. Um, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that in time because for the life of me, I cannot find where to buy nice wood since we moved. Like I knew lots of
Oh,
places down in Indy, but now that I'm up here in Muncie, I can't find anywhere that has it. So I may have to drive, an hour and a half to go pick up $30 worth of wood.
fair enough. Um, have you thought about doing it out of something else?
Yeah, that's kind of made me start thinking about doing it out of aluminum or something.
Would you consider 3D printed?
or considering 3D printed. Yes, I have considered
Okay.
3D printed.
Okay.
Um, now that I have my Prusa Mini running dead reliably, I'd probably need to get some like black filament or something. Because
How
right
do
now
you
I
like
have red, but
how do you like the Prusa Mini so far?
I love it. I don't think
Okay.
about it. I put prints on it. I hit go. I walk away. I come back. They're done.
Okay.
It
Because
just
we
works.
have we have two Prusa i3s, um, but I've thought about getting a smaller one for some of our because they're pretty cheap compared to the main ones, and we're keeping our printer running pretty much 24/7 right now, and have been for a decent amount of time. Um, Whether it's stuff for the shop or stuff for other customers, like if I need something 3D printed, I almost have to schedule it in. So,
Yeah. On
um,
on my printer right now, I'm printing. I would say 2.5 or 3 kilograms a month, um, which basically means it runs just about around the clock.
yeah,
So
yeah. Hang on, I got some cat
some
noises I
background
need to
noise.
deal with.
That's a cat. I thought your wife was, I don't know, making chicken schnitzel or something and banging it out. Anyway, Harrison's going to go take care of a cat that's doing who knows what. Of course, he waited until I finished talking about the thing that. I know what I have to talk about. I have improved upon Gridfinity, at least for some
Ooh,
applications. I have
do
a new
so.
system that I am calling Shelffinity. It's like Gridfinity, but for shelves.
Okay.
Um, so it my original plan was basically just to scale up Gridfinity, but
Mm-hmm.
Gridfinity doesn't scale that neatly for a couple reasons. The
Okay.
biggest reason being that the bases get rather wimpy, just because they're mostly air, and then
Mm-hmm.
also if you were to 3D print everything, it would take a very long time to 3D print larger bins.
Okay.
So Shelffinity is designed to be, I'm not going to say all laser cut, but it's almost entirely laser cut, with wooden bins. And then there's just some 3D printed little feet. And the 3D printed little feet are actually what sits onto the grid that you put on your shelf. And if you're on watching the video, ignore the tape on this. I just glued this one earlier today, and that is acting as a clamp.
Do you have
Um,
anything that you have to use for alignment to make sure your 3D prints go in the right spot, or are you cutting holes?
so there are holes on the bottom of the holes on the base of the bin that these little feet pop into, and those are spaced neatly to just align with the grid. And
That's
so
really
a
cool.
bin takes like 30 seconds to laser. A grid that's 4 feet by a foot or so takes maybe 20 minutes to laser. Um,
So is there a lot of dead space that you can get other stuff laser cut out of it, or are you just taking a full sheet and then cutting a bunch of pockets for feet?
the You end up with lots of little I've been calling them coasters. It's a like 3.5 inch or so square, um and my grid spacing is 4 inches, so take 48 inches divided by 4 inches, multiply it by 3 to get the 12, and you end up with that many squares. It's a lot of squares. um but like I did some rearranging in here, and I've started using the small handful of bins that I have, and I really like it. Like Gridfinity really just changed the way that I stored things in my toolbox over there, and I think having a bigger system is going to change the way that I store stuff on shelves.
So here's a thought. With those smaller ones, can you make smaller boxes that go in the traditional Gridfinity?
Probably they would be awfully small. I don't know. Probably actually, I think you could.
Because you could do kind of what you're doing in this one, where you have holes in it and where you're 3D printing something on it. So what you could do is the old Gridfinity system with your new box with your little centerpieces, you could just put a couple holes and then glue the bottom of the traditional Gridfinity to that, um, and then you could make acrylic Gridfinities where the bottom still lines up, so you still get all those little pieces out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you could do something like that. Though I'm not using acrylic. I'm using hardboard,
Oh
which I
yeah.
like because one, it's very consistent, eighth of an inch. Like as far as a wood product go, it's very precise. It's
Mm-hmm.
also very cheap. It cuts really well, and you don't have to do any sort of sanding or painting or anything.
That's awesome.
It's a little wimpy. It's a little bit weak, but it's like $15 for a 4x8 sheet, and I just have them slice it
Nice.
up for me at Lowe's, and then I can just throw it straight onto the laser.
Nice.
Um, but I've been having a blast. I made I think 12 bins today, uh, and
I
I've
like
been
it.
I'm slowly everything in the shop will eventually be organized.
Yeah. We actually kind of had our own, I won't say gridfinity, but they're super cute little bins that I really want to, I think we need to put up a post on Instagram. I don't think we've put a post up on them yet, but um we had these what are they, like 1 by 1 by 4, like the traditional little drawers that you get whenever you're trying to organize like drill bits and tools and stuff like that. Like they're everywhere. Um and we got one for screws, but because a lot of the gun stuff that we do, a lot of times we have to put custom hardware to hold everything together, depending on what we're doing. Like for our markuts, like we provide our own hardware because we're trying to standardize on some of that stuff a little bit more. And we got all these different length ones depending on what gun it's going in. And when you buy the boxes of screws, the boxes that they come in are just a little too big to fit in those bins
Yep.
traditionally. And so you either have to smash them up or dump them all in, and they get unorganized. And they come with like a single divider down the center. Um, but I challenged my cousin to print out smaller bins. So we got 4 of these little itty bitty bins in one of those trays, and it's super cute and it organizes so well and it looks so
Yep.
good. And I'm sure people have done that before. But we just took one of our bins that we were using and kind of shrunk it down, or I think that's what he did, and shrunk it down to fit it. And I mean, they're just so cute to look at because they're these tiny little bins that have all these tiny little screws in them. So
Yeah. That's
we'll
how
probably post
Gridfinity
it at
makes
some
me
point.
feel.
Yeah.
It scratches
So
the like the collector and keep things neat and organized niche. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. Well, I love it because like he's got we got a label maker. Um and so he's labeled all the different screw sizes on this thing. And so I love it because I can just see, like 440 screws, and I pull it out and it's got all these different sizes and these tiny little bins, and it's like, "Oh, that's so cute." I love it. But no, it's great. What else? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was
I
gonna
have
say I have
something.
one more thing going on, which is I'm in the process of receiving a Christmas gift from my dad, which is a new powder coat booth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the current one I threw together for like literally under $100 in like an afternoon with a circular saw and a brad nailer and like some plastic wrap. And I mean, it's worked. Like I've powder coated things in there, but it's been messy and dirty, and wasn't. I don't know. Just it was like clear painter's tarp and 2x4s. It was never going to be very nice. And my dad for Christmas was like, "I'm going to build you a powder coat booth." And so it's going to have like a top down downdraft, like nice dust collection, and walls that are made out of hard stuff. And it's going to have like 2 overhead lights and then 4 lights on the walls, and you know all the switches and outlets you could ever want. And so I'm very excited for that.
That's awesome. My dad's made us several different cabinets and things around the shop, and um, I love it because one, it's nice and it helps organize us, and two, I think he enjoys it because he's helping us out. And it just adds to the whole experience of starting a business. So I love it. Um, but I was going to say something else that happened today. I didn't think about it immediately because my cousin's been dealing with it more than I have. Um, but what would your reaction be if you were using a less than a year old Haas lathe, and you had stuck some material into You had stuck some material into the what's it called? Not the chuck, but the area behind the chuck, and the word is eluding me right now. Um,
It's not a feeder
anyways,
tube. The
yeah,
through
like the
bore.
feeder tube, something along those lines. The exact word is eluding me. And then when you pull that material out, you find a random O-ring on it.
Huh. Broken O ring or complete O ring?
Complete O-ring.
Huh.
And the part you stuck in there was a gun. I mean, the O-ring does not go on the gun. Obviously, it's way too big for the gun. Um, but there was a random O-ring that is almost the exact same size as the not bar feeder, but the
The
tube
spindle liner?
section. Spindle liner. Thank you. Spindle liner that goes between the chuck and the back of the lathe. But there was a random O-ring that is like the perfect size of the spindle liner, or a little bit bigger than the spindle liner. And we called our Haas rep, and he said there's nothing on the Haas machine that should have an O-ring like that ends up in it. He says, "Do you have an aftermarket collet system that we installed? Because that might have it inside it." And so we tore the whole new collet system that we installed on it. It only had two O-rings according to the 2D cutaway CAD drawings, and both those O-rings are where they need to be. And so now we are trying to figure out, what is this O-ring? How did it get in our spindle bore? And is something going to break? Like on our machine, did something come off?
Oh
Like there's
gosh.
nothing that we've machined, because the only thing that we've machined that hasn't been a solid bar has been gun parts, and no gun is going to have an O-ring of that size in it.
And it was in that spindle liner.
Yeah, and we don't actually have true spindle liners that actually decrease the size. It's just the spindle bore that
Yeah,
goes
yeah.
between the front and the back, just the metal tube, and it's like it looks like it belongs on the Haas. And we tore apart the three jaw truck that we took off. We tore apart the Royal Collet system we put on. Um, we have gone through different manuals of everything that we can think of. Um, and it's not broken. It's not torn. Um, and it's making us incredibly nervous.
Could it was it the right size for the Royal Chuck?
No, it was too small.
Huh.
So it because it was too small in both diameter and like the actual diameter of the gasket or of the O-ring,
The cross
and
section.
the cross sectional diameter and the physical diameter. Um, so
I mean,
it
at some point, you have to go, huh, and just listen for odd sounds for the next couple of months.
well,
But
here's the thing: it's been making odd sounds,
oh, interesting.
but
Maybe that O ring's important.
we've attributed that to the cold that it's been, because when it warms up, it goes away. But it has been making noises, and it sounded like belt noises, and then as it warmed up, it would go away. It would start to go away, but not completely. And we tried calling the Haas tech when we first started doing that, and tried sending him videos and talking to him over the phone while it's doing it. And he's like, "Those just sound like normal Haas noises." And we're like, "Are you sure?" So, um,
I mean, a bearing wouldn't have an O ring in it. Um, that's, I don't know.
it is hurting our brain. Like there's different plugs and caps that can go on it, and we're like, maybe it's one of those. And all of the ones that came with the Haas to plug off different holes, they all have their O-rings still on them.
Is it the right size as those?
No, it's
Okay.
not. Um, there hasn't been anything that we've found that is the right size for this. Um,
It couldn't have been like holding a tag onto a barrel or something from a manufacturer.
no, we tear them all the way down to where it's just the barrel, basically.
Hmm. One in a
And
million
plus,
shot from a 6-year old outside your window.
no, um, it's driving like we have torn this machine apart now, and I'm hoping we can get it all put back together with that. Like, I'm hoping we're not making it worse at this point. Um,
Could it
but
have been on like the inside of a panel, like bent into a square to fit a square groove or something that you wouldn't have necessarily caught
but how
because
did it
it's
end up in the
square and
spindle
people
bore?
think of O-rings as round? I don't know, 1 in a million shot.
Nah, that's the thing that's making us really nervous.
Or like you set your
Um,
material down on it and then it rides the material up into the.
there is one location that we have found that it could be, but it makes zero sense. So when you disassemble the chuck to install it, like if you take the 3-jaw chuck and put the Royal Collet system on it, the spindle liner or the spindle tube gets threaded on to whatever chuck you have, and you could stick this O-ring at the bottom of those threads, and then when you
Oh,
screw this thing
okay.
on, it could be like a face for that. But there is no instructions anywhere that says that say it goes in that location. And everyone we've talked to in all the research, like, no one has it going there, and no one has anything there. And they said there's no reason to have anything there.
I don't know. I could see a use there because if you're there could potentially be I think if I'm understanding this right, a misalignment between the chuck and that tube, and you wouldn't want the tube to like vibrate your chuck. And so
The,
maybe if you by putting a little piece of rubber in there.
the tube
No,
threads on.
okay.
The tube threads on. The tube is actually what connects to the chuck to allow the hydraulics to clamp the chuck open and closed. So it's threaded on the end so that your chuck actually threads onto this tube, and that tube actually moves back and forth whenever your chuck is clamping or unclamping. And so, um, like, and that tube isn't designed to bottom out, because how you set how far your jaws open and close is by threading or unthreading
Oh,
it
interesting.
more or less on that tube. So it's a floating thread that's designed to not be thread all the way on in the first place. So that's the other reason why it doesn't make sense why it would go there. Because when you're taking the 3-jaw chuck off, they want you to count the rotations. That way you can make sure you can put it back on in the correct location. Or when you install it, like there's grooves on the side of the 3-jaw that as you open and close it, you want, like, it has a top groove and a bottom groove, and then the jaw itself has a single groove, and you want to be inside a certain zone, and that means you're clamping properly. If you're outside that zone, then that means that you're at the limits of your hydraulic range, and you might not be have full clamping pressure on whatever it is you're trying to clamp. And so that's why you have to make sure you got to have threaded on the correct amount so that those gauges work properly.
Could it have been like in the chuck for shipping purposes and then
Just
removed
come out
and
now
yeah, these things
after all the
happen.
stuff we've
Machine
installed.
vibrations.
After all the stuff we've pushed through that bore, some of it basically the exact diameter of the bore.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's the thing that's like we've been racking our brain over trying to figure out. Like it makes no sense. And like we've had multiple conversations on the phone with the Hostech trying to figure it out and today. Like, hey, could it be this? Could it be this? No, there's no O-rings in that location. No, there's no O-rings in that location. Ah. And if there was O-rings in those locations, it would have been broke when it got inside your tube.
Well, I mean, if the machine's running,
Yeah, I know. That's what he said. He's like, just put it back together, and it's like it should be fine. I'm like, do we need to like note this for warranty reasons if something goes bad later that the Haas guy said it was okay to run?
well, here we go. We have podcast documentation.
Yeah, podcast
Haas, this is a
documentation.
binding legal document.
Yeah, this is a binding podcast, a legal podcast. So, oh man, yeah. So that's been. And now we got to put everything back together without solving it, which is the most frustrating part of it all, because we spent like 2 or 3 hours trying to figure this out. So that's fun. and we disassembled the Royal collet system way more than we probably should have.
This is
We got to
not
get
Royal. This is not a binding podcast.
yeah,
You can't take
yeah,
this
this
as
yeah,
hypothetically he might
us this is
have.
binding, but Royal this is not. So
Royal, don't use this against us for any warranty
yeah,
claims.
yeah, pretty much. Gosh. Although Royal is awesome in the fact that they give me all the schematics of what's going on inside
That
and
is
all the
nice.
torque specs for every single bolt and fastener on that system.
That is
So,
nice.
oh man, I for repairability and workability, I really like in the Royal stuff. Even though I don't think this is their fault. The O-rings that we found on the inside were like 3 times the size and diameter compared to this one. Um, so, and cross-sectional diameter. But
I saw a used Citizen lathe the other day on Facebook Marketplace, and it looked like it was in pretty good condition. It was like, I want that. This would bankrupt me if I bought it. I don't even know what the price was, but like even if it was free, like just trying to get the machine installed and running probably would bankrupt me. But it was like, man, I want that.
yeah,
I mean, a Swiss lathe, doing pens or whatever would be great.
yeah. So there's another. I'll give you guys a little bit of a teaser for something that we might be doing. I don't want to say anything too much. But we have a new gun related product that we will hopefully be working on in the future. And it's something that, as we've kind of gotten into the gun stuff a little bit, it's something that was never on my radar until my dad tried to buy some upgrades, and this was part of the upgrades. And he asked us if we could make it, and it was originally made out of aluminum. But I was looking on the market, and there are some in titanium, but they're very rare. And so I'm thinking about trying to make them in titanium as like a really high end replacement for a stock component on a gun. So,
Interesting.
and it would
I
be
want to ask questions, but
it would be a cosmetic improvement more than anything functional. But people spend a lot of money. Okay, to put it in perspective, I did a little research on this. For non-titanium components of this style, cheapest I saw for like an aluminum bare bones one was around $20. Middle of the road was around 60, and I saw someone selling these in titanium. The cheapest titanium one I found was 160, and the most expensive I found was 750.
is this like, let's say, something that would get a thread on one end and have some holes on other ends?
No, it would not.
Okay.
No, it doesn't go on the end of your gun. I will say that.
Okay.
Because
Because I knew
we've
you were
also thought
threading
about
barrels the other day. And it
yeah,
was like, is it a muzzle brake or a
I've thought
suppressor?
about doing
But
muzzle brakes, but no, this would not be a muzzle brake. Uh, and it's a component that I would never have thought of, just because I didn't think people would spend that stupid amount of money on something like this.
the only thing I can think of is like the mag release, which it's probably not. But
No, it's not.
I don't know what else you would do because it can't be in the.
I kind of like the mystery. So there's someone who listens to this podcast that's going to be yelling at their computer or iPhone or whatever, and they're going to be like, "I know what it is," and you might be right, but I'll try. I'll confirm it later.
It sounds like, since it's material agnostic and kind of price agnostic, it sounds like, I assume it's not something that's in the, I don't know what you call it on a gun, the drive system. It's not on the critical path in the firing system, I would imagine.
No.
So, and it's not a sight, I'd have to also imagine, unless it's like iron sights. But
And it's a part that we are going to attempt to make through the mill and the lathe. It's going to require both.
you went roboty on me. Can you repeat that, please?
Oh, it's going to be a mill lathe part, so it's going to require both and dedicated fixturing. So,
well, sounds interesting.
At least the way we want to make it. And
is it something that mounts via the Picatinny rails?
No,
no?
Picatinny rails.
So it's not a foregrip.
No.
Yeah. Well, you got me.
I'm
I'm
gonna just keep
stumped.
this big I'm gonna keep this big
Yeah.
grin on for now because it like it's literally it wasn't on my radar in the slightest. Um, but now that I see it, I can't stop thinking about it.
Is it
Um,
something that all or most guns have?
no, no. Well, I guess on some level, yes, but not like this. I guess I can tell. I mean, that's not really that big of a
No, no, no.
deal.
It's a
But
mystery. Keep the mystery.
keep the mystery. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh,
I
oh
won't
here,
spoil.
outro. We can do this as part of our outro. Next time on Taps and Patience,
Yeah.
Harrison from Precision Ingenuity will reveal his dastardly plan. What will he make? It's not a muzzle brake.
Meanwhile, back at the Batcave.
Will he find out or will he suppress us?
Oh man. Yeah.
That was a
Okay.
bad suppressor pun. Anyway,
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we'll keep the mystery for now. But I'm excited in the fact that I really wanna give it a shot and um
that's it. Pun. Yeah.
yeah, give it a shot. And I feel like that in recent with some recent projects that we've worked on that I have a really unique method for doing it and that would be very, very cost effective compared to what I've done in the past.
I think that's a good thing
So
to have in your sights.
yeah.
You don't want to just go with a stock one.
How many gun puns can we make? Shots fired.
Yeah.
No, but it's exciting. And I feel like it's one of the first products that I've thought of where I could it actually would have a somewhat decent profit margin compared to everything else that I've done because everything else I've done so far either I have to price it so high that I don't sell any or I have to price it so low that I make nothing. Um,
Yep.
so so I feel like this could be something that I could actually get a decent return on investment and would be hard to replicate if you didn't have the right machines. So it's not something like someone couldn't produce it at scale without having a mill and a lathe, at least in the way that we're trying to do it. You could make it all on a mill, but I feel like you would have a lot more work post processing than you would if you had a mill and a lathe.
And this is how Harrison ends up with a Williman.
Oh, that would be awesome. But I don't even think a Willman's the right answer for this.
Oh, really? Oh, so
Yeah.
Milton then.
No. I really think the way that I'm thinking about doing it, um, you can't bar feed it either. Um, because of the way it's designed, you have to have dedicated fixturing. Because I'm doing something that was probably never designed to be done on a lathe. I'll give away a little bit, and
Those are my
so
favorite
that's
things.
and so um, it's going to require special fixturing for the lathe. But if it can be done and it works, um, then I think it'll do well, and I think I can produce it at a good cost, and the titanium element of it will. Um, and the cool thing is I could make it out of anything after I get titanium down. If I wanted to make aluminum
Yeah.
versions or copper or other materials, which might give a little bit of a hint as to what else it could be for those of you that are listening. But I think it's one of those. It's a type of part that almost any material could be on the table. So,
Sweet.
anyways, I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah. Well, on that note, do you want to bring us out now
Yeah.
that we've built suspense for next week?
Yeah. So, for those of you who have been listening, now is the time to subscribe and tell your friends so they can learn the mysteries that I've been working on. So, this is Harrison with Precision Ingenuity signing out with AJ from Design the Everything. See y'all next week.
Bye. I jumped the gun.